The series has been viewed by millions of people across the world and prompted discussions by politicians and parents about the radicalization of young men by social media.
Here to discuss this and the rise of incels are cyberpsychologist Dr. Nicola Hamilton and documentary filmmaker Alan Bradley. Thank you both so much for joining us on the show this morning. I mean, we've heard this word incels, I think, particularly since came to my mind since Trump's first presidency, the tiki torches, all that sort of stuff, the toxic masculinity. For people at home who don't know, what exactly is an incel?
So an incel is someone who's self-described as an involuntary celibate. So they're not having sex, they don't have a partner. And beyond that, it's also a culture of people. So it falls within the manosphere, which is a kind of a number of groups that are all very misogynistic, anti-women, anti-feminist, and who blame a lot of society's ills or all of society's ills on women. Incels themselves are kind of the darkest part of that space, and they are very, very nihilistic. They view the world as set up in a very rigid, hierarchical way. People fall within particular categories and you can't move in and out of them. So they talk about things like Chads and Stacys, who are the very successful people in society. So men who are hyper-masculine, muscular, very attractive, women who are hyper-feminine and very beautiful. They've got the normies, who are the betas, the second level of people, who are most people. And then they've got themselves, and they are the worst of society. And they despise all of these groups, including themselves, and possibly even more themselves than anybody else.
Now, would this sort of group exist without the internet? Because we've always had maybe subcultures of teenage life that have existed, and maybe they've had despised themselves, they've hated others, that sort of thing. That's kind of a rite of passage for a lot of young people. But to this degree, it's almost weaponised it online.
It allows them to find each other online, which I think is unhelpful. Like, we've always had radical groups. They are a radical extremist group in the same way that a lot of others are, like right-wing extremists, etc. So that's not new in and of itself. But this kind of misogyny is new as a radicalization in itself without other characteristics. So it's similar to other radical groups, but different in that most radical groups, like right-wing extremists, jihadis, they're trying to create a utopian society for themselves, and everybody else is the problem. But for incels, there's no utopian society. Everything's dark. They just see it as immutable, unchangeable, and the only way to solve it is violence and to destroy it all. And that's quite new, but they do find that community online, and so it amplifies something that already maybe existed.
Terrifying.
Yeah, I think these could have been feelings that young people could have been having as a teenager of a certain age anyway, and then the internet allows them to find one another. It's worth noting, we're talking about it in the context of adolescence, but adolescence talks about a million things. This is just one thing that came up at one point in the drama, and the word incel, Alan, in this context was used as an insult against a young boy. It was used as a bullying term. That's something that happens as well.
Yeah. And I made a radio documentary about incels in Ireland, and I actually spoke to a teenager from Dublin who shared with me that, incel is commonly used as an insult in school. It's something they're all aware of. It's not something you'd ever want to be. But then there's loads of young guys who identify as one.
How do they feel about that? Because you've talked to several of them here in Ireland as well, because this isn't just some mad thing that's happening in other countries. We have them here, possibly at home now, in their living rooms where their parents are watching the television. It's happening here and now. What were the common denominators in who you were speaking to, and why do they feel the way they did?
Yeah, I think it's great you said they're guys that we all know. I think there's this idea that they're very strange, odd people, and we'd know straight away they're an incel. Not always. A lot of the guys I spoke to were actually really good to chat to, really friendly, easy to talk to. That kind of surprised me, I think. But having said that, they tend to be people who are quite socially isolated, maybe not many friends, very poor relationships with women, never able to enter into the dating world at all, usually. And yeah, apart from that, it can kind of be anybody, all walks of life.
Is there an well, there clearly isn't an understanding, because as you get older, or as I've gotten older at least anyway, I've come to understand that there's phases in life, that there's times where you're going to be single for a while. There's times as you find yourself and you grow as a person, you develop as a person, you make connections with other people. It seems to be a sort of a resignation that, no, this is how I identify, it's beyond my control, and I'm going to subscribe to this, and this is who I am.
Yeah, it's a whole world view, that this is how the world's set up. They call it the black pill. And this is this ideology that the world is set up in a way for these Chads and Stacys to succeed, And if you are, this incel category, that's your life. There's nothing you can do to change it. And like you were saying, you just kind of have to either tear the world down, I suppose, or resign from it, or sadly, often there's a lot of suicidal ideation as well.
You mentioned the black pill there, but there's also something called the red pill, which wouldn't be as extreme as that. But in today's society, what is causing young men to, and a lot of them are young teenagers, they're 11, 12, 13, to feel like this and to pursue connections with these people?
So one of the core things in vulnerability to any kind of radicalization, and it's the same for this, is a feeling of uncertainty, not knowing where you belong, maybe you're seeking identity, or you feel lonely. And if you think about adolescence, all of those things often happen to people in adolescence. Everything's changing, everything's uncertain, your body's changing, the society's changing around you, you don't know where you fit in. And so for some of the people like Andrew Tate, etc., they're deliberately targeting young men because they know they're vulnerable, right? So that doesn't mean that all young men are going to be radicalized, but they're certainly at a point in life where they are more likely to be radicalized or more vulnerable to it. And even older men who are feeling vulnerable, uncertain, maybe you've had job loss, you're feeling isolated, you don't have so much money. So all those kind of things, or feeling like society's prejudiced against you, even if it's not true, is also a point of leverage for radicalization. For blame. And looking for blame. So what radicalization does is, first of all, you've got these vulnerabilities, and what the radical group offers you is an answer to that, someone to blame for your problem. So it's not about you. You don't have to do any development to make things better for yourself. You just need to blame the outgroup. And that answers all the questions, and black and white ideology as well. So it's very, very clear, like with the incel culture, you've got these successful people, the normal people, and the incels. Nothing can be changed. There's no nuance to it. There's no gray areas. There's nothing like that. And when you're uncertain, someone offering you certainty is very appealing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry there, but Alan, I just want to bring you in here. When it comes to what these children are being exposed to online, and let's call a spade a spade. Most of them are children. I think your research saw that, is it every 29 minutes, graphic violence, sexual content. These kids are exposed to that every 29 minutes. And does that cause them to be desensitized to the actual norms of society then, and what a decent human being should and shouldn't do? That's what's happening here?
Yeah, these spaces are really, really warped in the ideas that they spread. It's really, I can't express how extreme the content is. Like,
were you shocked?
Yeah, and I went into it expecting...
You went into a forum, didn't you?
Yeah, oh yeah. But I expected it to be horrific, and it shocked me. So I couldn't express in the morning what these things are.
Yeah, but give us a vague example. I mean, but just for anyone who might be a bit worried about this. I mean, if there's little ears around you, tiny ears, to listen. But I think it's important for a lot of adults and parents of teenagers here to listen. What's going on here? Yeah,
well, like loads of debates over and back between them about why we should legalise rape. Debates on, sexual assaults, encouraging each other into those kinds of actions, sharing videos of those types of very graphic assaults.
Sharing videos?
Yeah, loads of videos, images, taking images of, naked images of women that they've obviously shared, intimate images, but using these on the platforms, then tearing these women to shreds and having great crack over doing that. It's wild stuff. It's lawless.
And they tear each other to shreds as well. That's what the disturbing thing is. So it's like they'll post pictures of themselves and allow themselves to be knocked down to their bare bones of humanity. Yeah,
they'll put a picture up of themselves to be rated by each other, but of course they all zone in on each other in a terrible way and drag each other down. Was
it hard to become a member of this forum? Because you can't just, I can't just log in and be allowed in there. There's a process, isn't there?
Yeah, you kind of have to sign in and they ask you a few questions, but if you can get in fairly easy, which is quite concerning. Anybody could get in if you just answer the questions in the correct way.
And some of them are just open as well.
Yeah.
You could just wade in. If you've got the internet, you can just go. Nicola, I always talk about phases, and it might be a phase in your life for a certain couple of years, or when you're a teenager, or you're going through a phase, and you're kind of like, I'll develop. As I mature, I'll progress as a person, and I'll change, or I won't be this anymore. It seems though that once you subscribe to it, you can become stuck, and that is your label. Then that's who you are, and you're in a community then that encourages you to stay in it. Is there Are there examples of people coming out of it or
Yeah.
waking up, I suppose?
There are. And what tends to happen with incels in particular is that they notice that it's not working for them, right? At a certain point, now not all of them, but some of them be like, I actually feel worse than I did before. I feel more depressed. I don't leave the house. I'm not in contact with anybody. I'm never going to get a girlfriend. And there are other forums for people who are leaving or who have left the incel community. And they'll often go and look at those forums. And there's people who were incels offering advice on how to get out and talking about going to therapy and how much it helped them. Sometimes it might be that they meet a woman that they're interested in, and that makes them look at things and go, actually, she seems like a nice person. And maybe that's challenging their views about the world. And again, they start to look at ways out of that. And it's difficult to do. Like, the further into it they are, the harder it is to do. And there's also something called malicious envy that's a personality trait. And if you're high in malicious envy, you tend to view other people as having something you don't have, but you hate them for it and you want to tear them down. And that feeling actually makes it very difficult to experience growth and to aspire to something better. So if they're experiencing that, that makes it difficult for them as well. And that's just kind of part of who they are and something that they have to work with. So there's barriers in place, but there are also opportunities to come out. And one thing I would say is that early on in this process and in any radicalization process, people sometimes throw questions out to people that they trust, their family members, friends. And if they're met with derision or contempt or dismissed, it drives them further into those communities. So if someone you know, a young person you know, starts suggesting this stuff, have an open, curious conversation with them about the topic, rather than going, that's really stupid, I can't believe you believe that.
Because if they're suddenly displaying attitudes towards their females in their life, like their mothers, their sisters, derogatory terms, that's a huge red flag there. And it doesn't just stay behind screens, by the way. I know that 59 cases of real-world deaths because of self-described incels have happened. It's absolutely frightening what's going out there. I'm almost terrified to even look on the internet with all my nephews. And I've loads of them and I love them dearly, but just think they'd be exposed to that is terrifying.
Yeah, vigilance, communication again, and have an open conversation where you listen. Alan Bradley and Nicola Fox Hamilton, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for your insight.